for these 3 days has been Atithi Devo Bhava. Become one to whom the guest is as good as God. As we have seen over the last 2 days, serving and honoring guests is considered a very important part of Vedic culture. Actually, hospitality to guests, inviting others home and feeding them, offering them hospitality, is something that is part of cultures worldwide. In every country, probably this kind of practice and culture exists. Of course, it is decreasing in this modern day and age, but if you look at the traditional cultures in most lands, there will be a culture of inviting and serving guests. That's because the Vedic culture originally was the culture throughout the world, and some of these elements are still remaining. And of course, it is just human nature to want to associate with people. So, even though this culture exists in so many other countries, but it is in the Vedic culture that we see the serving of guests and many other similar practices attaining a certain level of refinement and emphasis that is not usually found in many other cultures. In pursuance of the discussion on this topic, we began discussion on the very famous pastime of Sudama, and we came to the point where, upon the persuasion of his wife, Sudama, although not inclined to come to Krishna in Dwarka and ask for some material benefits, but to please his wife, he did so. He arrived, Lord Krishna accorded him a very nice, warm welcome. He worshipped him actually, he honored him, and Krishna chatted with Sudama for a long time about their old days when they were living as young students in the Gurukul of Sandipani Muni at Avanti. They exchanged many pleasant memories about their childhood, their boyhood. And then Krishna, being the super soul in everybody's heart, the all-knowing Supreme Personality of Godhead, also could understand that Sudama had brought along some chipped or flat rice to offer to him, but he was now feeling ashamed to offer it. Sudama was embarrassed because he thought, looking at all the opulence of Dwarka and the palaces, and he was in Rukmini's palace, such opulence that would rival the opulence of the heavenly kingdom. And he was feeling embarrassed. How can I offer this kind of food stuff which is meant for poor people, and also which is relatively stale and hard by now after so many days of traveling? How can I offer this to Krishna? So Sudama was not inclined to offer it, but Krishna was very inclined to have it. And we concluded yesterday on the point that with a mischievous twinkle in his eye, Krishna was telling Sudama, so what have you got? What have you brought from me, from home? What is the gift you have brought? And even if my devotee offers me a gift that is extremely small, materially speaking, but I consider that very, very significant because it is offered with devotion. On the other hand, if somebody offers me from a material viewpoint, an ordinary viewpoint, a gift that is considered very valuable or very big, but it is not offered with love, then I consider that offering to be very insignificant. Now, Krishna very well knew the caliber of Sudama's devotion. So he knew that this offering, even if it was a very ordinary thing from a material point of view, but actually it would be delicious to Krishna because Krishna tastes the devotion in whatever is offered to him, not so much the actual substance that is offered. So this is the important principle which we concluded with yesterday, and Krishna followed up this verse by the famous Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam verse, which is found in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the exact same verse. So when Sudama was feeling embarrassed in this way, Krishna made a resolve, a firm resolve in his mind. He said, Sudama has come a long distance to see me, walking all the way, hungry, poor, emaciated, weak, fatigued. But nevertheless, he has come. In all these years, he has never once prayed to me for any material benefit. But this time, he has come at the behest of his wife, being kind and compassionate to her, not wanting to see her suffering. So I will fulfill the desires or the intention, not the desire, but the intention of my devotee Sudama. And I will award him riches that even the demigods in the heavenly planets cannot obtain. Now a question may arise. And somebody actually asked me this question. Somebody heard it on the internet, so they wrote me an email asking me this question. And the question was that why did Krishna have to wait so long in Sudama's life in order to make this resolve that he would award all sorts of riches and wealth to Sudama? A valid question, isn't it? After all, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana paripasate tesham nityaviyuktanam yogakshemam vahamyaham. He says, for one who is constantly thinking of me with devotion, with one-pointed attention, who serves me with eagerness, I protect what he has and provide him what he lacks. So why was Sudama not being provided whatever he and his wife needed? Now the Acharyas explain it as follows. They say that there are two kinds of renounced devotees who are averse or who don't want to involve themselves in material affairs. One kind of renounced devotee is averse to sense enjoyment or wealth or anything of this world. For example, Jada Bharat. We've all heard of Jada Bharat. He was formerly the great king Maharaj Bharat, who was then obliged to take the birth of a deer, and in the next life he became Jada Bharat. So he was extremely averse to any form of material enjoyment and facility. So Lord Krishna doesn't force someone of this category to accept wealth. On the other hand, the second category of renounced devotee is one who is indifferent to wealth. And there's a difference between being averse to wealth and being indifferent to wealth. A person who's averse to wealth hates it. It will affect my renunciation, it will affect my spiritual life, I will not even touch it. I will stay as far away as possible from it. Even if someone awards it to me, even if God were to come and give it to me, I will not like to take it. The other, being indifferent to wealth, it means that whether he has wealth or he doesn't have wealth, it's the same to him. He's detached from within. He or she is completely absorbed in devotional service to the Supreme Lord Krishna. Therefore, for such a person, having wealth or not having wealth doesn't really make a difference. So he's indifferent. In this category is Prahlad Maharaj. And we know the pastime of how after protecting Prahlad from Hiranyakashipu, Lord Narasimhadev awarded him the benediction that he would live for many, many years and enjoy all kinds of material opulences. Now, what about Sudama? Which category was he in? Anyone? Which of the two categories was Sudama? both. He was initially in category 1, averse to sense enjoyment and material opulence. But when his wife repeatedly kept urging him to go, feeling compassion for his wife and relishing the prospect of having to go to Krishna and being able to see him, he shifted to category 2. So he became, in his mind, now he was mentally prepared to accept wealth. So since Krishna doesn't force the renounced devotees of category 1 to accept wealth, but he may offer wealth to category 2. Why may? Because he will do it if he thinks that this devotee will not get distracted from my devotional service if I provide him wealth. So now he was confident that Sudama would not be distracted by wealth. And he had moved into category 2. So therefore, he now made a firm resolve that I will award him riches of the kind that he has never experienced. And then Krishna, he reached out for Sudama and he grabbed the little bag that he had, that pouch that he had, which was hidden under his cloth. Sudama had been making a vain effort to try to hide that pouch, but the bulge of that pouch was unmistakable. So Krishna knew where the pouch was and what was in it. So he tried to grab it. And of course Sudama tried to resist. But Krishna is the all-powerful Supreme Personality of Godhead. And even from a worldly point of view, he was playing the role of a Kshatriya, a powerful warrior. And poor Sudama, he was thin, weak, sickly, emaciated, bones and veins showing. What strength did he have to fight against Krishna, to resist? So anyway, Krishna was very easily able to snatch away that pouch of flat rice. And he said, "Oh, just look at this. What is this? What have you brought? You have brought this delicious flat rice. Is it for me? You brought this for me. I am extremely happy. Indeed, even a few grains of this flat rice will satisfy not only me, but the entire universe." So Krishna grabbed it. Now this is a very important principle that Krishna is speaking here. That these grains, few as they are, if they satisfy me, they will satisfy the whole universe. Yasmin tushte jagat tushtam. And in this connection comes to mind another little story. So we'll take a detour for a few minutes and have a brief narration of another pastime and come back to the story of Sudama. And this is a story I'm sure also all of you have heard before, but nevertheless it's relevant to the discussion. This is the story of the famous Akshaya Patra. When the Pandavas were in exile in the forest, they were living with the sages. And they were living very simply with only roots and berries and fruits and so on. Now, one time, the sun god gave a gift to Draupadi of a container or a pot. That was called the Akshaya Patra. Patra means a vessel. And the speciality of this vessel was that whatever food was cooked in it would remain inexhaustible. And as many people who wanted to eat from this could eat. But there was a rider, there was a condition. That once Draupadi had eaten, and after that, for that particular day, this vessel would not be able to provide even any amount of food. So, but this was a great boon to the Pandavas in the forest. So every day, Draupadi would get some alms, get some food from here and there, and she would cook, and it would be enough to feed everybody. Not just the Pandavas, but Draupadi and the other sages. One time, however, it so happened that Durvasa Muni, the very powerful mystic yogi, was visiting Duryodhana in Hastinapur. Now Durvasa Muni is known for his anger. He gets inflamed with anger very fast. He also gets happy very fast. That is actually a quality of Lord Shiva, who is called Ashutosh. Ashutosh means, Ashu means quickly, Tosh means to be satisfied. So Durvasa Muni is a partial incarnation of Lord Shiva. So he had this nature. Duryodhana, cunning as he was, and being aware of the nature of Durvasa Muni, he tried to trick Durvasa Muni into going there in such a way that the Pandavas would be in dire straits. His plan was, he urged Durvasa Muni with very sweet words, feigning or pretending to have great concern for the Pandavas. Oh, my brothers are in the forest, please go and to use modern parlance, check them out. Please see how they are, give your blessings to them. And please go there, they will feed you sumptuous prasadam. And Duryodhana knew very well that Durvasa Muni traveled not alone but with disciples, and with 10,000 disciples. So then Durvasa Muni came to the place where the Pandavas were staying, and he arrived by the arrangement of Providence at a time when Draupadi had already eaten. And now Yudhishthir Maharaj was the one who welcomed Durvasa Muni. And Durvasa Muni said, Yudhishthir Maharaj, my disciples and me, we are hungry. So please offer us your very famous, your famed hospitality. Yudhishthir put up a brave front and he smiled, and it was a duty, his dharma, to welcome a guest. After all, Atithi Devo Bhava. He said, of course, O great sage. Meanwhile, please take your bath in the river and chant your Gayatri mantra and so on, and then come back and we'll have a grand feast ready for you. Although Yudhishthir Maharaj didn't have a clue how that would happen, because he knew that the Draupadi had already eaten the meal. So then Durvasa Muni went away to the river, and Yudhishthir Maharaj came back and said to Draupadi, you know, this is the problem, this has happened. And she said, oh my God, what to do now? So the Pandavas were really puzzled. They didn't know what to do. And they were aware of the temper of Durvasa Muni, and they didn't want to be cursed. In the meanwhile, they were struggling and thinking, racking their brains about what to do. And amongst them, Draupadi was always, all of them were pure devotees of Krishna. And Draupadi wanted to take shelter of Krishna, so she called out Govinda. Govinda, Krishna was in Dwarka at that time, but having heard this, she didn't have to use a mobile phone or any WhatsApp messaging or anything. But Krishna heard it through the transcendental airways. And Krishna immediately landed up in the forest. He didn't have to book any tickets or anything, no waiting list. He just immediately appeared there. And he said, Draupadi, you called me. He said, yes, we are in a great perilous situation. And he described it. He simply smiled, Krishna. He said, whatever is in the Akshay Patra, just give me that. She said, that's the problem. There's nothing left because I've eaten everything. I've eaten. He said, never mind. Just see, there may be a grain there, at least one grain. So then Krishna picked up the pot, and sure enough, he saw one little grain somewhere stuck in the corner of the inside of the pot. And he took that with his finger and he licked it. And he said, I've never tasted such delicious food in my life. I'm completely full now, fully satisfied. And at that exact moment, Durvasa Muni and his 10,000 disciples were standing up to their waist in the water in the river, chanting their Gayatri mantras. And all of a sudden, their bellies began to bloat, and they were feeling as if each of them had eaten meals for 5 or 10 people. They could practically hardly move. They were rendered almost immobile. And Durvasa Muni was thinking, my word, Yudhishthir Maharaj is famed for his hospitality. He must have prepared an enormous feast for us. And now if we don't show up, then if I show up and say I'm not hungry, and I've already told him we're going to come back and eat, it's going to be such a loss of face, such an embarrassment for me. So I will not be able to face Dharmaraj, Yudhishthir. So, and he looked at his disciples, and each of them was holding their hand on their belly, and each were looking at each other. And then they decided. Meanwhile, Yudhishthir Maharaj had sent Sahadev or Bhima, I think one of the two, please find out the whereabouts of Durvasa Muni. And they came, oh Muniji, where are you? Oh Durvasa Muni. And Durvasa Muni heard that and he fled. He fled from there along with his 10,000 disciples. And that is how Krishna saved the Pandavas and Draupadi from great danger. So the principle of Yasmin Tushte Jagat Tushtam means that when Krishna is satisfied, everybody is satisfied. Because Krishna had eaten that one morsel, whether it's one morsel, one grain, or whether it's a huge feast, like he does in Jagannath temple in Puri, where he eats 56 times a day. So whether it's one morsel or a big feast, Krishna is satisfied only by devotion. So because there was devotion involved in the Pandavas offering of one grain that was left there, he was completely satisfied. And being so satisfied, the whole world was satisfied. Durvasa Muni's stomach was also full. So a similar thing is being stated here by Krishna. He says, my friend, you have brought this for me. And indeed, these few grains of flat rice will satisfy not only me, but the entire universe. And then he took a palmful of that flat rice and he ate it with great relish. And he found it so tasty, he dipped in to take a second palmful. And at that time, Rukmini Devi, his queen, held his hand and said, my dear Lord, please don't do so. She said, this is more than enough to secure this Brahmana a place, to secure him an abundance of wealth in this world and the next. All prosperity, after all, depends on your satisfaction. So why did Rukmini Devi hold Krishna's hand and stop him from eating a second palmful of that flat rice? The Acharyas mentioned 3 reasons. One, Rukmini Devi was saying to Krishna that actually simply by a play of my glance, I can award anybody enormous wealth. And that play of my glance comes about when somebody has satisfied you, my Lord. So when you are satisfied, automatically I provide ample wealth and opulence to your devotee. And what this Brahmana has offered to you now is enough to make him opulent in this life and the next. But if you take it a second time, then I will have to completely surrender to this Brahmana. I will have no independence, no individuality left. I will just be completely sold out to him. So please don't do that. So that was the first reason. The second reason was that she was also looking at the relish with which Krishna was eating. And she also understood that this flat rice was rich and delicious because of the devotion that was in it. And she didn't want to be deprived of it. She also wanted to taste it, and she wanted to make sure her co-wives, the other queens, would get it, and also the other residents of the palace, the maidservants, etc., would get it. So she wanted something left behind for all of them to eat. So if Krishna ate there would be hardly anything left for the others. And the third reason is that she told her assistants, her maidservants, actually this rice is very old, it's stale, it's hard. It may cause indigestion to Krishna, it may hurt his tender stomach. So we've all heard this story before, and we've also heard that Rukmini Devi prevented Krishna from eating a second palmful. But here are the 3 reasons why she did that. In any case, Krishna agreed, and Krishna enjoyed his one palmful, and then Sudama stayed there for the night, and the next morning was time for him to leave, and Krishna escorted him a distance up the road. And as he left, he was immersed in bliss. Now remember, Krishna did not give him any wealth before he left. Neither did he didn't offer any envelope or something. He didn't give anything. And neither did Sudama ask for it. And Sudama was completely happy not asking for it. So as he was walking, his mind was immersed in bliss. And he was thinking, oh, the Lord is so kind. He is the Lord of the entire universe, the spiritual master of the whole world. And still, he took such nice care of me. He welcomed me. And he treated me like his own brother. Even the residents of the palace, including his queen, Rukmini Devi, were astonished to see the kind of treatment that he gave me. And he didn't think about the wealth at all. He was completely satisfied. Actually, Krishna had given him great wealth. That was the wealth of his own association, the wealth of his own mercy, which is far, far more valuable than any wealth of this world. So as he was going along, Sudama became overwhelmed with a sense of gratitude at how Krishna, being such an exalted person, was treating Sudama, who was such a small person in Sudama's estimation, and he treated him in such a nice way. And then he chanted a very nice verse which is quite famous, popular. Kwaham daridra papiyan Kwa Krishna Shri Niketana Brahma Bandhur iti smaham Bahubhyam parirambita. Sudama was saying, Kwa aham, who am I? Daridra, I'm poor. Papiyan, I'm sinful. Brahma Bandhu iti sma aham. I'm not even a Brahmana. I'm just born in a Brahmana family, but I don't have Brahmanical qualities. Kwa Krishna, and who is Krishna? Shri Niketana, he is the Lord or the residence of the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi Devi. But yet, Bahubhyam, with his arms, Parirambhitaha, he embraced me. So Sudama was overwhelmed by the kindness of Krishna. And his heart was so full of joy and gratitude that he could not take his mind off this. And then he began to reflect. And then he thought, actually, after a while of thinking like this with gratitude, he said, yes, he was so kind that he even ate my flat rice, which is not worthy of eating. And I'm sure he did not give me any material wealth, because he must have considered that if I give wealth to this insignificant wretch, he will get spoiled. It will spoil his devotion. Sudama was thinking like this about himself. And he was thinking this was how Krishna must have reasoned in his mind. And that is why Krishna had not given him any wealth. But of course, Sudama was in for a surprise, and a very big one at that. When Sudama finally reached the place, the region where his home stood previously, he was astonished to see his little cottage was not there. And in its place there was a huge palace with pillars decorated with corals and rubies and splendorous gardens and all sorts of birds cooing there, an opulence that he had never even dreamt of. It was practically just like Krishna's palace, the same kind of opulence that he saw there. He just stood at one spot, transfixed in sheer astonishment, thinking, how on earth did this happen? What is this house? And then he saw many people rushing about here and there. And these people, they noticed him, and they all came rushing towards him. Then he realized that they were maidservants and servants who had been designated to serve him. And then one lady came out. She was very finely decked with gorgeous clothes and ornaments and everything. And when she came up, he could recognize this lady. So all the other people there, they said, Sudamaji, this is your wife. So what, my wife? And then his wife came out and she held him by the hand and took him inside. And it is explained that when Sudama's wife was sleeping that night, when Sudama was sleeping in Dwarka, then when she woke up to see her house transformed into this palace, and she woke up to find herself transformed as well. She was no longer the skinny, emaciated Brahmani. She was now very healthy and beautiful, and she had all sorts of expensive clothing and so on. But then why was Sudama the way he was before he left for Dwarka, when he returned? The Acharya said because had he looked different and opulent, his wife may not have recognized him. So then the moment he entered into his house, then Sudama also became transformed. And he also got a healthy body, wonderful clothes. And then Sudama was thinking, this must be only because Krishna ate that flat rice, and he is the one who actually blessed us with this opulence. But he was praying very hard to Krishna that this should not make him proud, that this should not make him distracted from spiritual life, from service to Krishna. Many times, devotees say, I want to earn money, I want to earn more money so I can serve Krishna, I can give a lot of donations to Krishna, which is fine, which is good, and many devotees do that. But there's also the risk that you earn the money and then you change your mind because now you have so much money. And then you think that, I think I'll give a little less than what I thought of originally. Sudama was afraid of this kind of thing creeping in. So he was praying to Krishna for his protection. And by constantly meditating on the lotus feet of Krishna, then Sudama was completely purified. He was actually already very pure. But still there may have been some very minute traces of pride left about his own renunciation as a Brahmana. And Krishna wanted to remove that as well. And that came about very easily by Sudama's meditating on the lotus feet of Krishna. And then Shukadeva Goswami explains, Sudama returned to the spiritual world, which is the destination of the great saintly persons. So in this way we see how Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, serves guests, and to what extent he went to serve guests. If Krishna, the Supreme Lord, can do this, why should we, as his servants and his devotees, not be willing to do that? And of course, when we serve devotees of the Lord, then we get even greater benefit. Sometimes we see that this is an example of where a guest, and we've seen other examples also, of when a guest comes in with a very favorable intention, and then he's already a friend and he comes also with a favorable intention. Now the question may arise, what would happen if an enemy comes to our house or to our place, and how should we deal with that guest? Actually, Srila Prabhupada in one purport in the first canto, he says in connection with Vidura that according to the Vedic culture, one should even treat an enemy well if he comes as a guest to our home. And we should treat him so well that he will not have any fear. So this is a very important part of and this may sound strange to us, but let me remind you of the goings on in the battle of Kurukshetra. The Pandavas versus the Kauravas. All day long, from sunrise to sunset, they would fight, bitterly fight. wide-scale slaughter of people and elephants and horses was going on. They were viciously fighting each other. But when sunset arrived and they all had their camps, the Pandava camp, the Kaurava camp, after that they would mingle with each other. They would walk into each other's tents, and when one saw the other coming, they would welcome. Even Duryodhana welcomed Arjuna into his tent. And they would mingle with each other. Such was the ethics and the principles they followed in those days. Can you even imagine such a thing now? In this day and age, when you just throw a bomb and run away, or keep a bomb somewhere and then disappear, and let other innocent people die a horrible death. So in the evening, so even though Duryodhana, now we're talking of Duryodhana, remember, not Yudhishthira Maharaj even. So when Duryodhana would see Arjuna coming into his tent, he would realize he's my guest now. We're not fighting now, we'll fight from tomorrow morning again. The fighting time for today is over. So now he welcomed Arjuna. He made him sit down, he offered him refreshments, nice sweet words of welcome. Yes, Duryodhana also. And this was going on. Sometimes the Kauravas would go into the Pandavas' tents and they would have discussions. When Arjuna came into Duryodhana's tent, Duryodhana had to make him fearless. And that's the injunction. So he said, Arjuna, you have come for something, it looks like. Come, why don't you sit down? What do you want? Do you want the kingdom? I'll give it to you if you just ask me. Just say the word and I'll give this kingdom to you. And Arjuna was a Kshatriya, so he didn't want it like that. He didn't want charity. Of course, that's another big story. So in any case, these kind of dealings were going on there. Even when an enemy came into the camp, but if the enemy came with a favorable intent, as did Arjuna when he entered into Duryodhana's tent, or as the Kauravas did when they walked into the Pandavas' tent, then they were treated very nicely, very favorably. But what if an enemy comes as an enemy with hostile intent, with an intention to destroy or even kill? In this regard, I'll tell a story from the Ramayana, and this is narrated by none other than Lord Ram himself. In popular culture, Vedic culture, it's called the Kapod Upakhyan. Kapod means a pigeon or a dove. Upakhyan means a story. Now this is the time when Vibhishan, the younger brother of Ravana, had left Ravana's shelter, Ravana's company, not shelter really, Ravana's company. Ravana had actually thrown him out. And Vibhishan left. Ravana humiliated him and sent him off. And he said, because Vibhishan was doing the right thing that a brother should do, he was cautioning Ravana. He said, you do not know who Lord Ram is. There is still time, my dear brother. Return Sita with honor to Ram, and still you and the whole dynasty of Rakshasas and your whole kingdom of Lanka can yet be saved. But Ravana was in no mood to listen. And as Chanakya says, that when you give good instructions to an envious person, it's like feeding milk to a poisonous serpent. The poison of the serpent only increases. So similarly, Ravana's envy and anger merely increased. And being infuriated, he began to speak very harshly to Vibhishan. And in substance, he said that with brothers like you, who needs enemies? In simple language, that's what he said. And he asked him to basically get out. He said, go away from here with only your breath. If you delay any more, I will kill you. So Vibhishan left with a couple of his associates. He went by the skyway and he came to the place where Lord Ram was stationed with the monkey army. And they were waiting for the bridge to be built, and that was taking time, and they were waiting for the Lord of the Ocean to appear. So when Vibhishan arrived at that point, he was standing in the air at an elevation in the sky. And the monkey army, they saw him. And immediately some of them leapt up in the air and grabbed the 4 of them, because there were 3 others with Vibhishan, and they dragged them down to the ground. And then they began to bind them. And they were talking amongst themselves. And they said, this is, Vibhishan introduced himself. He said, I am Vibhishan, the brother of Ravan. I have left Ravana for good, and I have come here to take shelter of Lord Ram. So please accept me. Do not doubt my word. But naturally, it was wartime. It was a peacetime. And Vibhishan had come straight from the enemy's camp. So he was an enemy. So naturally, they suspected strongly that he would have a hostile intent. Somebody said, maybe he's a spy. He's come here to try to understand our army and our weapons and how strong we are. And some said, maybe he's just cheating. Maybe he wants to come here to assassinate us, or maybe to harm Lord Ram. So many of them came up with all these objections. And then finally the matter was brought to Lord Ram's attention. Lord Ram asked each of them to give their opinions. It's a long story, it's a beautiful passage, but I am summarizing it. And different members of the Vanara army and also the bear army, they gave different answers. Mostly they were very suspicious of Ravan, of Vibhishan. Hanuman was quite inclined to have him, although he was not totally convinced, but he was, of all of them, he was somewhat inclined, maybe not fully so. And when they asked Lord Ram, what should we do? So Lord Ram then spoke a very famous verse. Again, one of my favorite verses. Sakrit eva prapannoya tavasmiti chayachate abhayam sarvada tasmai tadam yetat vratam mama. He said, Sakrit eva, even once, prapannoya, if a surrendered soul, one who surrenders to me, even once and comes up to me with the plea, yachate, and he pleads before me, what does he plead? I am yours, tava asmi, my dear Lord. I am surrendering myself to you. I am yours. When somebody comes to me, whoever he may be, even my enemy may come. Even if Ravana today were to come and say, please accept me as yours, I will accept him, I will forgive him of the grave offense he has committed by kidnapping my good wife. Abhayam sarvada tasmai dadami. So I will award such a person fearlessness. Vratam mama, this is my vow. So immediately, so here in this case we see that Vibhishan was an enemy, or at least he belonged to the enemy camp. But he came here with a good intention, not with a hostile intent. And Ram was able to understand that. And therefore he accepted him and gave him full shelter. So here is a guest who is an enemy but comes as a friend, genuinely. Then he is to be completely accepted and given shelter. And in order to convince the monkey soldiers, Lord Ram narrated this Kapod Upakhyan to illustrate how, what to speak of an enemy who comes in a friendly spirit. Even if the enemy comes in an inimical spirit, still we should give him shelter. Then he narrates this story. Once there was a hunter. He lived on the edge of a forest, and his livelihood came about by hunting the animals and birds in the forest. So one time as he entered the forest, somehow he found some birds. He hadn't got food to eat, no animals around, so he saw this dove, who apparently was foraging for food for her family. And he somehow captured her and held her, so he was happy that he had at least something now to eat. But just then, by the arrangement of Providence, it started raining very heavily. A huge storm broke out, and the hunter was going hither and thither trying to look for some shelter. and there was very strong wind blowing. It was quite cold. And the hunter had been hungry and he had been wandering all day long in the forest, so he was shivering with cold, fright and hunger. And at that time he came and took shelter under a tree. Now again, by the arrangement of providence, it so happened that this was the very tree that was a home of this dove, the female dove that the hunter had captured. And then as he was standing with her, crouched up below that tree, that dove bird's husband was on top in the nest. And when he didn't see his mate coming for a long time, and then finally he saw her, so he started to lament about his misfortune. And she understood that her mate was lamenting. So she tried to pacify him with words of wisdom, and she spoke some nice philosophical words to pacify him. And she said, actually, my dear husband, this is not the time for grief. Our bodies are anyway perishable. One day or the other we have to die. But our life is a life lived in vain if we don't live according to the principles of dharma. And now we have a very important duty before us. We have a guest who has come to our house, which is, this tree is our house. And even though he has captured me and he is going to kill me, he has come as an enemy, he has acted as an enemy, but now he is in need. He is a guest in our house now. So what is the value of this body, which is going to perish one day anyway? So let us sacrifice our body, our everything. So let me give myself up, no problem. So in the meanwhile, while the other dove, the mate of this dove, was reflecting on all this, he decided, yes, what my wife is saying is correct. In the meanwhile, the hunter was still shivering and feeling feverish and so on. So the captured dove told her husband, it looks like this hunter is really miserable. Why don't you do something? So the other bird came down and spoke to the hunter. My dear hunter, it looks like you're in great pain and agony. What can we do for you? So he said, I'm feeling extremely cold. Can you please light a fire for me? So where to light a fire from? So somehow she flew here and there and she saw some camp and there was a campfire. So she took a few dried twigs and so on, lit them and came back and then put together a pile of semi-dried leaves and lit a small fire there. And then the hunter was feeling some warmth. So they were serving their guest in this way. And then the he-dove, he asked the hunter again, are you comfortable? Is there anything else we can do for you? He said, actually, I'm feeling warm now, but I'm very hungry. I haven't eaten all day. So the dove was thinking, both the dove, the husband and wife, began to think, what food can we give? There's nothing here at this time. So then the husband, dove, actually he said, okay, since you're hungry and there's nothing else to eat, and he didn't say that, but very obviously meant it, that you're a non-vegetarian. So I will jump into the fire, give my body up for you to satiate your hunger. And he immediately jumped into the fire. When that happened, the hunter was taken aback completely, was struck with wonder and filled with remorse. And he was thinking, just look at this pair of birds and look at their values, look at their character and their adherence to dharma. And woe to me, who have been so cruel. I have been causing so much harm to animals and birds all my life. And even though I wanted to kill both of them, but they have sacrificed their life voluntarily for me. So at that time, he released the female bird whom he had captured. And the female bird couldn't live without her mate. So she said, what is the use of me living alone like this? So she also jumped into the fire. And as she jumped in, immediately she saw that there was a very effulgent vehicle that had come. And in that vehicle she saw her mate, who now had a divine body, a heavenly body, effulgent, shining and blissful, and he was beckoning to her. And then she rose from the fire with that same heavenly body, and the two of them departed for the higher planets, for the heavenly planets, because of their merit in serving the guests up to the point of even giving their own lives up. So Lord Ram was narrating this story to the army. So he had already given a lesson in terms of Vibhishan, and this was a supporting story but a lesson in itself. And all the soldiers were thoroughly convinced, the monkey army, and then they welcomed Vibhishana in their midst. Now, with such stories as we've been mentioning over the last 2 days, these are extremes. And it's not that we are capable of imitating such events or such things in our life. But again, as we mentioned the other day, we take the spirit of it. The spirit of it is that we should not mind some inconvenience that is caused to us when guests arrive at our home or in our ashram or in our temple. We should serve them to our heart's content. So this is an example of how we can deal with guests who may come as enemies to us. What about those who actually come to us posing as friends? And if they're actually friends, well, we've discussed so many examples of that, like Sudama and so on. But what if they come posing as a friend, but they have hostile intent? Take the case of Putana. When Krishna was born, he was only a few days old, maybe 5 or 6 days old. And at this time, all the ladies from not only Braj, but even around, nearby, they all started streaming into the house of Mother Yashoda, because it was a very joyous occasion. After many years, Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda had a child, and such a beautiful child at that. So all the ladies would come and they would enter into Mother Yashoda's inner chambers, where she was with baby Krishna and she was feeding him. And naturally, for the ladies, coming and going in the inner chambers was not a problem. The men were all outside. And Putana, the fierce Rakshasi, the demoness sent by Kamsa, took on the form of a very beautiful young lady. And she came in to the inner chambers. She was unobstructed at any point while coming into the courtyard, entering the house, and then going into the inner chamber, because everybody thought she looked like a very dignified, respectable young lady from a very good family, so nobody suspected anything wrong. And even when Putana walked in the form of a beautiful young lady, and she picked up Krishna and she wanted to feed Krishna her breast milk, even then neither Mother Yashoda nor any of the other gopis in the room suspected anything was amiss. And then she began to feed Krishna with milk. Krishna recognized, oh, we have a guest now. She's come as a friend, but she's not a friend. She wants to kill me, but she is feeding me milk. She wants to feed me. So who feeds milk? Mother. So she's my mother. So I must accept her milk. At the same time, she has come with an evil intention. So I must purify her of this evil intention. Nobody who comes in contact with me in any which way, out of love or out of envy, fear, anger, hatred, or for any reason, anyone who comes in touch with me shall not go away without being completely purified. Therefore, I must purify this lady. So then he drank the milk, he sucked the breast milk out, and along with the milk he sucked out her very life air. And Putana could not maintain the form of the young lady that she had originally assumed. You see, demons and demonesses who have mystic yogic powers, when they are in great turmoil at the time of death, they cannot retain their assumed forms and they revert to their original forms. So Putana's original form as a Rakshasi was horrible to look at. It was 8 miles long. So when Krishna wouldn't let go of her breast, then she ran out screeching in great pain. And somehow just at that moment, Mother Yashoda and the other gopis had left Krishna with Putana, having full trust in this young lady, and they were busy with some other chores. And then Putana went rushing out into the fields, and then she lay down and she fell down dead. So here is an instance of how Mother Yashoda and others treated her nicely because they were unsuspecting. But Krishna knew it. So even though she had come as a guest, he treated her well in the sense that he accepted her offering, he drank her milk, and he eventually awarded her a destination akin to that of a nurse in the spiritual world. But then he also made sure that she died, that she was punished and purified at the same time. The punishments that Krishna awards are actually means of purification. They're actually expressions of the Lord's mercy. Another instance that comes to mind is that of a Brahmana called Gopal Chakravarti. Gopal Chakravarti was a ritualistic Brahmana who was in the employ of Govinda and Hiranya Mazumdar and Govardhan Mazumdar, who were the father and uncle of Raghunath Das Goswami in Saptagram. This pastime appears in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. One time Haridas Thakur, the Namacharya, was passing through Saptagram, and Hiranya and Govardhan Mazumdar, they were very pious souls, and they had heard the glories of Haridas Thakur, and they very much wanted a sadhu, a saintly person like Haridas, to come to their house. They wanted to offer him hospitality, and they wanted him to speak Krishna Katha. And they had invited then many of their acquaintances and friends and so on. So Haridas Thakur gave a very nice lecture on the holy name, in which he mentioned that the true fruit of chanting the holy name of Krishna is pure love of Godhead, Krishna Prem. As far as getting rid of one's sinful activities or sinful reactions, that is not really the primary purpose of chanting the holy name of the Lord. That is only a secondary thing, it's a byproduct that comes up. Now, when Gopal Chakravarti was hearing this, he became very annoyed. He felt that he was a great scholar. So he stood up and in a very disrespectful tone, he began to criticize Haridas Thakur's statements. And he said, how is this possible? You are saying that simply by chanting the name of the Lord, one can, what to speak of, get liberation, one can attain Krishna Prem. We see that yogis, for them it takes many lifetimes to be able to come to the point of liberation. And you're saying that liberation is just a secondary byproduct of chanting Krishna's names? If what I'm saying is wrong, then may my nose fall off. And if what you're saying is wrong, may your nose fall off. And that was a very offensive thing to say to Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur, being a humble Vaishnava that he was, didn't take it to heart. And he just tried to explain gently and philosophically. But Hiranya Mazumdar, Govardhan Mazumdar didn't take to it kindly. They were furious, and right there in front of everybody, they admonished him. And they said, go away from here, and they dismissed him from their employment also. So when a guest comes in and creates a scene like this and creates a disturbance, offends another guest, offends the host, then such a guest need not be entertained. But of course we have to be careful how we deal with such a host. Because inasmuch as we have responsibility for that guest, we also have responsibility for the other guests. If because of this one guest, the other guests are extremely offended, that would not be nice. When I was living in Vrindavan, in our Krishna Balaram Mandir, we had a peculiar problem amongst many others. And we used to have a regular group of guests who would come every day, unrecognized. Now these guests were special guests because they were expert pickpockets. And they would come there only for the purpose of picking pockets of people who were coming for darshan. And it's not only our regular devotees of ISKCON, but in Krishna Balaram Mandir, people come from Delhi and from so many other places. There's always huge crowds there at the temple. And in the evenings, especially around Sandhya Arati and so on, it's very easy to pickpocket. I don't know it's very easy, but at least they did it. And they had really nimble fingers. So we used to get so many complaints about people losing their wallets and their mobile phones, and we were struggling with this whole problem. And we would make morning announcements, please be careful of your valuables, don't bring it into the temple hall when it's crowded. Then we installed these cameras, and we had security guards sitting and being glued to the cameras, and actually it succeeded to a large degree. We found many of them red-handed. They were caught on the screen on the camera. And then the guard, they would go and catch them. I won't tell you what happened afterwards. Certain unusual things which may not be according to the letter of the law. But eventually, after a bit of nice treatment, they were sent to the police station. Of course, I didn't authorize it, but it was done nevertheless. So yes, they are guests, they come as friends, they come as if they're just devotees who are coming and they're participating in the kirtan. They'll get purified, of course, because they're hearing Krishna's names, but they're also committing offenses. So anyway, even though they were guests, they had to be dealt with in a particular fashion. Many years ago in Mayapur, dacoits came, and they thought that the jewelry that Radharani had was made of real gold, and they wanted to steal the jewelry from the deities. And at that time, the devotees, they were living there, and one of our devotees, the devotees naturally tried to resist the dacoits who had guns. And one of our devotees, he was then a brahmachari, now he's Bhakti Rasamrita Swami, many of you know him, he lost a leg. The dacoit shot, and he lost one leg in that whole matter. So we can't say, well, they're guests, so we should look after them nicely. Well, you have to deal with them as is practical. Whenever a guest comes in and is offensive to Krishna in any way, in word, thought, at least in word and deed, thought we don't know, but at least in word and deed, then we have to deal differently. Intelligently, but differently. Or if they deal, or if they're harsh with other guests, then also we may have to deal appropriately. However, in general, now when we see guests coming to this temple, for example, or any other temple that we may be in, what should be our duty as devotees? As devotees, of course, we should welcome the guests, a smile, a Hare Krishna, maybe a quick greeting, and if they're inclined to some conversation, maybe tell them a little bit about Krishna consciousness if they're willing to hear, but only if they're willing to hear. Don't impose yourself if they don't want to hear. They want their space, they want to come take darshan and go away. Don't bother them. But if they show inclination for listening to you, you're friendly, they see you a couple of times, the resistance breaks down, they want to chat with you, then you can tell them something about Krishna consciousness. So that's fine. So we should make our guests feel comfortable, and we should make sure that we don't preach very heavily to them, we don't hit them up, and so on. So basically we should deal with them in such a way that they feel very happy, very welcome, very privileged to be here, and they feel inclined to take to Krishna consciousness. Now we've been speaking these 3 days only about the host, the duties of the host. And somebody asked a question on the first day, what about the duties of the guests? Indeed, that's an important question. You see, all of us are guests sometimes, but we are also hosts sometimes. So as much as it is important to know our duties as hosts, it is also important for us to know our duties as guests. At the very least, what we can say is that as guests, we shouldn't create any havoc. Like Shishupal did, or like Gopal Chakravarti did, or something like that. That's the very least, obviously. But more positively, we should try to see that we are very sensitive to the conditions and situations in which our host is. We shouldn't burden him with anything. If we feel that the host is undergoing some trouble, we should be sensitive to that and concerned about it. It's also better to inform the host in advance of how long we intend to stay. We should also participate in the host's activities to the extent that is appropriate, and become part of that family, whether it's at home or whether it's here in the temple. And we should, of course, not take undue advantage of their hospitality. Overstaying our welcome is one of those things. There's a proverb in English that says, fish and guests start smelling after 3 days. Of course, we don't eat fish, but the proverb is as it is. In South India, there is a proverb that feed the guest on the first day on a banana leaf, which is like a grand meal. On the second day, feed him in the hand and the palm. On the third day, feed him on the floor. So he gets the message. But these are just almost like jokes. Obviously, we're not going to literally do that. But the point is that if we overstay our welcome, then that is not good either. Even though the host may, out of a sense of duty, be willing to extend himself or herself for us, but we should also be sensitive about this. Yes, and I'll conclude with what Bhagavad Ashray Prabhu said the other day. There's a little quip that you have here. All our guests make us happy, some when they come and some when they leave. So let's try to be guests of the first category, that our hosts are happy when we come and not happy when we leave. And similarly, here also we should try to incorporate these principles as far as is possible in a devotional context. So thank you very much. I think I have overdone my limit. We have 5 minutes, but there'll be some announcements now to make. So I'm sorry we can't have any time for questions, but I think I've dealt with most of the questions that were asked the previous day. Anyway, yes. So thank you very much for your kind attention and patience. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki